Welcome to the With Generous Hearts podcast, where stories and spirit meet. So today you have the opportunity and the gift of listening to a conversation with Charlie Deason. Charlie is a dad and a husband and a church leader. And I hope that as you listen today that you will be inspired and challenged and maybe made uncomfortable by considering the ways that God is calling you to intentionally use your gifts. I pray that this conversation blesses you, so let's dive in. On today's episode of the podcast, we have the gift of sitting down with Charlie Deason. I was asking around the leadership and saying, who lives generosity? Who embodies it? And multiple people said, Charlie. You got to talk to Charlie. So no pressure.
That's questionable, but okay. All right, helpful.
But I'm excited about this conversation and for you coming. So welcome to the
thanks
podcast.
For having me.
So you and your wife joined Christ Church about 5 years ago now?
That's right. The beginning of COVID, although it's somewhat of a long-winded, meandering story. So I was raised in Charlotte for the most part, and my wife is from Charlotte originally, and she grew up more in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
I grew up going to Myers Park Methodist.
Okay.
And then when we sought a spiritual home or church home for us, we got married in the Episcopal Church, and we actually got married at Christ Church, even though we were living in New York at the time.
Okay.
Her father has been a member of Christ Church for decades. And continues to be. And so when we finally moved home to Charlotte after our third kid, and we're looking for a church, it was very natural to come to Christ Church.
So what does it mean to have Christ Church as a spiritual home?
It's huge for us. But no, we have 3 boys too. They're 9, 7, and 5, and they are incredibly comfortable in Christ Church, which is a huge part of what makes it our spiritual home. Yeah. When they were younger, they would lay on the floor during discovery service and then contemporary service, and fortunately they mostly stay in their seats these days. But they're still just so comfortable, and they talk to people. They have friends here, and I just think that's very important. So that's one element of it. And then I think just more broadly, community is an important element, and then a forum or community in which we can explore our own faith, but alongside others that are trying to figure it out too, right? Whether that is through generosity, which we'll obviously talk about, or men's groups, or parent groups, or CCK, or whatever it is, right? I think all of that adds up to make this a place that our family calls our spiritual home.
I love that you're describing your kids on the floor, because my kids right now are 8 and 7, so we've got them kind of in the same age. And when we moved from watching online during COVID back into a pew, I was like, they're feral. I'm so sorry.
I know.
We've been watching online in our pajamas. There's goldfish everywhere. And so I can appreciate that. But I can also so much appreciate a church that's like, we're so glad you're here.
No judgment. There's never been any judgment on how kids behave in the services.
They just get to be here. And I wonder, so you've got 3 boys thinking about the world that we live in right now. How do you raise them as generous humans? What are y'all doing to shape them differently than a lot of the world around them right now?
Well, I'm open to suggestions on any and all of this, but no, look, I wish I could say we are incredibly deliberate in sitting down at the dinner table and talking about generosity, and we certainly have conversations about that. I think there's small things, too, that add up. For example, I know Natalie and team just started doing the QR codes to put in the baskets, right? And in the last year or so, I've found that to be a helpful way for our kids to feel like they're putting something in the basket, right?
Oh, I love that.
When it's not hard dollar money, because we tend to give outside of the offering, and so that's been one area that I think our kids have been exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Outside of the church too, I feel like there's more in schools these days. Our 9-year-old has learned in classes about spending and saving and donating, and there's a little more financial responsibility, which has helped and sparked some good discussions. But I think it's all just half the battle's coming to church, and once they're here, they learn about being generous.
I love at the discovery service that kids get to have roles in that too. So it's not just putting the card in the plate, but okay, I'm going to usher or I'm going to do this. And at our church, we've just moved to Charlotte, but our church in Greensboro before this, my daughter Olive was like, I'm going to usher. I was like, okay. And she's like, I'm going to get more money than my brother. And I was like, not the point.
But that's a noble competition. Yeah.
But she literally stood at every row and
Yeah.
was like, "Are you putting money in the plate?" I was like, "Oh, that's not the point." But there is something, especially like we give online, we make that available to say like, there's also our kids are seeing tangible.
Right.
Like, we're part of this.
Yeah.
We're part of this place. I wonder for you too, beyond money, what about service? Like, what about connecting in that way in your family? I know it's hard with young kids too.
Yeah, totally. Well, sorry, before I forget this, though,
Yeah.
an anecdote. I can't remember if it was Discovery. I think it was Contemporary, actually, where my sons helped with the offering and ushering and stuff. And one of them, instead of passing it down the aisle, he walked down each aisle back and forth and just held the basket. And people
He's like, "You will see me.
Exactly.
Yes, I will collect this."
So,
that's probably a good offering day.
There's a lot of
church.
methods, and whatever works, right? There's a host of activities or opportunities, but it's not always intuitive and easy to find. So certainly through CCK, you get exposed through those, through our roles on outreach and mission. And then I found, as part of, I guess, two other avenues, I've learned about more opportunities. One is Stronger Together, the men's group, where a group of us kind of compare notes on fatherhood, family, all that kind of stuff, and we brainstorm on how our kids can be more generous to the community. And then also my father-in-law and I'll often go and deliver food to neighbors in need through what's now Nourish Up, used to be Loaves and Fishes. And we take our boys along to that, and that's a tangible, I think you used that word earlier, that's a tangible way in which they can see people in the community that are very different from most of the people who come to our church, right? And so I think it takes some effort. I think the church is working on how we can enable more of that, but there is significant and impactful opportunities for even kids to be generous with their time and talent.
So much of service is like Habitat, like you have to be 16, or you have to, it's really hard. And I think one of the things that is so important about generosity is like, kids are sort of bent that way. Like they want that.
Totally.
And so the opportunities to sort of fan the flame of, we've got this. Like we want to care for our neighbor. We want to buy school supplies. My daughter was here for VBS and they did the collection for the foster village. And she was like, "I need 20 toothbrushes." And I was like, I have no idea. This is the first time you've ever been at a VBS here. I didn't know, but it gave this whole opportunity to have a conversation about foster kids, about, and so thinking about, she was like so excited to be part of it. Right. And I think that's one of those things is a growth edge, but I also think it gives us the opportunity to help kids understand like there's financial generosity, but there's also just our love for neighbor and what does that look like. One of the other things that highlights for me that's come up in a lot of conversations in this podcast series has been how that act of generosity means that we're seeing other people as fully human. Yeah. When you say like you're taking your kids to deliver meals, and they might see people they don't generally see, it's like, no, but this is a human being and they deserve to eat. And I think that can be such a powerful part of parenting. It's just like, these are humans, right? These are God's children.
Totally. And it's living into our baptismal covenant, right? Yeah. I'm going to butcher the description, but it's like seeing the humanity and God in every individual. So I think it's a very, very important part of it. Look, generosity is certainly important to who we are as a family. I also acknowledge that we're on a journey, right? And we are not, what was the parable of like the young rich ruler or whatever? It was like, told to give away all his money. I guess maybe we are more like that, and less like the communal living that some of the early disciples lived in. But I do think Christ Church has helped us in a couple different ways, in just being more intentional and thoughtful in how we give, both to the church and then to the community. Even just the seemingly simple act of pledging, right? Not every church does the whole pledge model and then you fulfill your pledge, but having a pledge requires you to sit down every year and think about, how much do we want to increase our pledge this year in light of our circumstances. And so you have that discussion, and then you feel an obligation maybe to fulfill that commitment that you've made. And I just think that intentionality has been important for us to wrap some structure around it, rather than just putting in the basket when it comes across at church and you're dependent on how much money you have in your pocket, right?
Like, oh, do you have a cash? Do you have a $1 bill? Do you have a $5 bill? Yeah.
So I think that model, that intentionality has shaped us in helping think more deliberately about how generosity can influence our family. So I just think that's been critical for us.
Well, and I appreciate that. So I know you've read the book God and Money, and it was passed on to me when I started here, so I've been reading it. And one of the things that has struck me about the book is that this role of generosity and contentment, that you have to grow a comfort level of saying, I have enough.
Yeah, totally.
And that is so hard in our world and our posture.
Right.
And in this book, and I'll link it in the show notes, there's some conversation about like, here's really what you need to live on.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing, just this last month, USA Today was releasing new statistics about what people think they need to be good in the United States, and it was like way higher.
and it always goes up. You ask someone today and ask them again 2 years from now, it'll be different. Yeah.
But what has struck me, and me and my husband have actually had really great conversations about this book around saying like, it's not so much what are we going to pledge, but what are we going to say I have enough to as a first part of that. And that just kind of like reshaped my brain a little. I mean, I know I'm the director of giving, but it reshaped my brain a little bit to say, not how much are you going to give, but like, what are you good with?
And how much you need to keep.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not how much you give, it's how much you keep.
Yeah. And then the question I had was like, so what's the role of contentment and generosity? Because that's what's pushed me in the book. Yeah. And there's been some days where I'm like, and I have enough with that.
Exactly. This is getting tough to reconcile with certain thoughts. Yeah. No, I wish I had it all figured out. That book has been amazingly inspirational and still trying to operationalize a lot of that in my life, but it is very thought-provoking, right? It's like, rather than thinking about how much should I give to the church or to others, instead thinking it all comes from God, and so how much do I give off the top and then need to keep, right? Like, how much do I need to actually live a life? And we're just taught so much by the world, quote unquote, around getting more and more and more, buying more and more and more, but also like that it is prudent to save. Like, is your 401k fully funded? Is your 529 sufficiently stocked for your kids' education? And oftentimes that feels a lot more like the rich fool parable, right? Where you build up the barns or whatever. Right, exactly. Yeah. And that book is very helpful in saying you can't think about it that way, because you're just going to have this insular focus of hoarding as much as you can, or maybe spending as much you can to enjoy life to the fullest. And it's important to enjoy life. It's important to save. I'm not diminishing that, but it's a philosophical mental shift of how can I first and foremost serve the world with the resources that we have. And so to answer your question on contentment, I'm not sure I figured it out yet, but the book is very clear about you need to seek your priorities to be in order, and then also the joy of giving, right? And the more you give, and this is supported by scientific data, like the more you give, the happier you are. And the inverse is true. The more you try to cling on to everything, the less happy you are. There's not a strong correlation between wealth and happiness.
Yeah. In fact, I think there's negative data around that. Well, and there's a Christian author that I love that says, I've never let go of anything that didn't have claw marks in it. Right? Like the human posture really is one of clinging. That's the sinful nature in us. The human nature of like, God's not going to provide, so I've got to take care. But what I've been thinking about too with that book, and I appreciate you bringing out the joy part, because I think what kids get, back to our kids thing, is the joy part. And they're like, how do we get back to that? You know what I mean? And there's something about saying, here's what I need, so that when something pops up that needs supported, I can just give to it, right? Like I don't have to think. There's just something about starting with these questions about what do I need to keep? But I think a lot of it goes back to being intentional. And I'm not sure we're really good at that.
No, we're not. I'm also smiling because I'm like, they also don't have financial responsibilities. So like our kids, we've asked them the question, like, I don't remember the amount, but if you had $100 million, like, what would you do with it? And they're like, I give $100 to each person I see in need, and then I give the rest to baby bundles. And I'm like, all right, baby bundles would love that. But it's just an interesting like thought exercise. But they are just naturally generous, right?
My kids, on the other hand, they had this assignment for school that was like, how would you spend $100? And they're like, I would buy chocolate chips.
Well, it's funny. I pause because they're naturally generous. They're not always to their siblings, but they're naturally generous to people in need.
Well, and I wonder too, in our church setting, there's a budget to fund. I mean, you said on vestry, there's the realities of what's going on. And it's a place that's giving away beyond ourselves. Totally. It's a place that's saying it matters that our neighbors are taken care of. It matters that there's well-being for the whole community and not right here. So how does that focus of Christ Church inspire you?
Wow. And I've learned a ton as part of the vestry. And I feel like I'm still drinking from the fire hose, even though I've been a part of it.
And if you're not an Episcopalian, vestry is just a fancy word for leadership team.
Fair, yeah. And so I've learned a lot about just where the expenses of the church go, and that's publicly available. Like anyone is able to see that through the annual reports, et cetera. And I think there's understandably a focus on outreach and mission, and we drive a lot of impact in our community, both locally and globally. But we are able to impact the community in a significant way, whether that's through our operating budget or through transforming hearts, right? Yeah. Where we have an off the top cut of every dollar that comes in that goes into very, very important missions within primarily the Charlotte community. Yeah. I've also, though, as part of the vestry, come to appreciate more the inreach, right? So there's the outreach, which is how do we help others maybe outside of the church, and that might be butchering the exact distinction here. But then there's like inreach too of the Center for Wellbeing and Care, right? Which has obviously been a big focus of the Transforming Hearts campaign, and that is just as important for different ways for outreach, but to provide a safe place where parishioners, others can seek free counseling. Like that is, I think, rare for any church, but rare for any organization.
One of the things that's happening this fall is a theme around perseverance and conversation around the parish around perseverance. And as we started to think about generosity, for me, they can be two sides of the same coin. Yeah. Because when things are difficult, people often shut themselves off. They often pull away from the church or community, or they lean in, right? And they experience the gift of God among them. And I wonder for you, as you think about your journey and your spiritual life and just life in general, where have you seen things like generosity and perseverance go hand in hand?
It's a good question. You describing that made me think of, I don't remember if it was Acts or whatever, but like when they talk about how everyone gave together, and like I always had this image of them living as a commune and everyone's super happy. And I don't know, I like to think maybe it wasn't the case, that people were, struggling to commit their limited resources, right, in a time when they were being persecuted and stuff. So obviously we don't live in that, in that type of situation today. But I think there's some analogs there where, to me, perseverance and generosity are interrelated, because we are not always naturally generous, or at least not in a naturally generous mood. And, when we go and make our pledge, how can we challenge ourselves to put ourselves beyond the comfort zone, right? Where you're actually giving something that hurts, or if it just like impacts the way you live your life. And you're, maybe other people feel better than I do, but I don't feel that way. Like I don't feel comfortable doing that. And to me, that's kind of the point, right? Like you have to persevere through that, because it's, what we should do, but also because there is that joy in the giving that you maybe eventually feel. But I think the perseverance is giving when you don't want to give.
Yeah. That's good. And I think
no,
but I think that's real for people. Yeah. I mean, and it's easy to just be like, my dollars don't matter, or okay, I'm uncomfortable, so clearly God doesn't want me to do this. And it's the pushing through of that. What has trying to live a generous life taught you about God?
I get back to that book that you mentioned earlier, like God and Money, right? Like, which I don't know if it's, I guess this part of trying to live a generous life is discerning what we should do with the resources with which we've been entrusted. And that seeking and leveraging the perspectives of experts like the authors, I think has evolved my thinking into how can I not just cling to everything that I think I need for not just a rainy day fund, but to make sure that like the 529s are super funded, and it's like, how can you give up that control and understand it's all in God's hands, and that should extend to the finances as well. So I think in that seeking, in that trying, that is a way in which I've tried to become more comfortable, but admittedly, it's a daily battle.
Yeah. It's funny. I think pastors, a lot of times, people will be like, they're like, we're just saying the same thing over and over again, because on Sundays, it's like, oh, yeah. Then on Monday, you're like, and I'll just take back control.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to say to people, like, I'm really good at like entrusting God with something, but I like to do what they call the holy hover, where I just like, okay, God, I trust you with that. But if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm right here. I can pick that back up. I can take that back. And I think that's why it's so hard to develop this generous life, because it does feel joyful, but it also takes change, like in yourself, and patience through that process.
And there's a stigma around talking about financials and generosity with your peers, right? Like it's one of the forbidden topics as you're growing up, and I bet you most people don't talk with their friends about it. But I think that also adds to the difficulty.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So you mentioned the Transforming Hearts campaign, which is a campaign to help expand the building, create the Center for Wellbeing, different components here at Christ Church. As I look at that building and look at what is happening in the space, there's excitement. There's excitement for what's coming. So what are you excited about for the next season here at Christ Church?
There's a lot. There's a lot going on, Transforming Hearts and otherwise. I've already mentioned the Center for Wellbeing and Care, which I just think that's already live and being utilized, but still a lot more that can and will be done there under Connor's leadership. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited for the new building and the coffee shop. I think the opportunity for connection there, whether it's parents dropping their kids off at CCK or people just popping in, parishioners or others in the community having meetings there, small group sessions. I just think that is an environment that doesn't exist today in Grace Church, and I'm very excited for what that will hold. And then we talked earlier about the off the top. That goes to the community. It's 10%, right? I'm blanking right now. I think it's 10% off the top of capital campaign. That's a meaningful amount of dollars. And given budget cuts to a lot of organizations that support those in most need in Charlotte, like there's going to be more people that need that. And so I think the relative impact of that money will be even higher now than ever before. So I'm excited to see the impact that has.
Well, and thinking about that impact, those dollars, I think part of generosity too is transforming our brains to think it's not just a dollar bill, it's food. Like it becomes food at Nourish Up, or it becomes a school supplies at the elementary school, or a book for Freedom School, that those things become actual met needs of our neighbors.
Totally.
And I think in a lot of ways, what I think about, especially when I'm like, I would like to cling to this, like I do not want to give this away, is that we have neighbors praying for answers to their needs. And we get to be it. Right? Like, and that's
a great way to think about it.
That, to me, the capital campaign is prayers for neighbors that weren't even spoken yet. Almost as if God was like, cuts are coming. And I'm going to prepare this place to meet the needs of its neighbors.
100%.
And the prayers. I've ended the show in the same way for everybody with two last questions. So lots of people, when life gets tough, they turn to God, but other people turn to snacks.
Oh, wow.
I want to know what your go-to comfort food is.
Go-to comfort food. It's like peanut butter, honey, and a banana.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's my go-to. That sounds like super healthy. I'm not super healthy, but that's just, if you ask me what I have at 10 o'clock at night before I go to bed, that's the most common thing. A little bit of cinnamon is perfect. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And what are you grateful for today?
I'm just grateful for Christ Church. And, we talked towards the beginning of the conversation about it being our spiritual home. And it really has become that in the 4 or 5 years that we've been back in Charlotte. And the community, everyone is just so welcoming. People of every age and stage, through CCK, through commissions, through just going to service, right, and seeing people. So everyone is truly bought in to the community and welcoming, and so I'm incredibly grateful for that, as well as clergy, staff, like everything. It all just adds up to our spiritual home.
I'm struck by two things in that conversation with Charlie. The first is that welcoming kids
well, matters. Kids being able to be themselves, whether they drop a goldfish or lay on the floor, but then also inviting them to participate like an usher or in service. And it strikes me that that is one of the things the church is called to do. And so I hope that encourages you to say hello and welcome to the kids that are around you in worship and in the community. The second thing is about that intentionality, about that role of contentment to say, what do I need to keep? How much is enough? So that then I can participate in the joy of generosity. I pray that as you consider giving and sharing and showing up and being a neighbor, that you would experience the joy of God. And after an episode like that, I want to boldly invite you to do two things: to share your story with us. You can use the link in the show notes and drop us a voice memo or an email letting us know the ways that God is at work, how you've been welcomed, how you've been shown generous love. And also, as the director of annual giving, to invite you to make a financial commitment, a pledge to our annual campaign, which you can do online at christchurchcharlotte.org. And I invite you to do that with intentionality, invite God into the space. And if you need a conversation partner, I am happy to sit with you. And so thank you for showing up and blessing the world with God's love and with generous hearts.